welcome to this week's episode of Type 1 Thursday here on the Low Carb Universe.com, I was going to say, but on our social media at least. And we are so happy that you are here with us and that we will discuss more type 1 diabetes today, because this is, of course, ahead of our event that will take place in June in Stockholm, Sweden, called Diabetes, and will feature all types of diabetes and all types and all, well, not all, because we can't fit as much as we want to into all these days, but at least a part of the problems and questions that may arise when you do live with diabetes. I'm Hanna Boëthius. I'm one of the co-founders of the Low Carb Universe and our beautiful shindigs that is going on over here. And I am a type 1 diabetic myself, otherwise it'd be very, very weird for me to have these presentations or these lives with you. And as I talked about last week, I was diagnosed when I was 2 years old, so I have a fair amount of experience with it. That doesn't mean that I know everything, but I do know a fair bit, and I have coached people in low carb and diabetes as well, so I'm not completely clueless is what I'm trying to say. Last week we talked about why low carb is a good idea for people with type 1 diabetes, and today we're going to talk about how to transition into low carb when you are a type 1 diabetic and what you have to watch out for and all of these things. And it's not without, maybe you do, when it comes to diabetes and living with it, you do often have to give it a few more seconds of thought than so-called healthy people. And when they make a new decision, they just go for it. But with diabetes, you tend to have to think once or twice of the repercussions and what you have to do and the preparations, which is, of course, the foundation part of the whole thing, as with everything else. So that's where I'm going to start today. How can you prepare yourself as a type 1 diabetic for when you're going low carb? What are the things you have to look out for? What are the methods of going low carb? Like, how can you how can you actually, like, palpably do it? And then, you know, some tips and tricks at the end. So stay with me for the next few minutes, and I will make sure that you have all the information that you need to make the transition to a low carb lifestyle as a type 1. So the preparations. As a type 1, you have one of the biggest problems when it comes to low carb is the fact that you need to, of course, continue to take insulin. That can prove tricky, but it doesn't have to be, because it is quite, it works out quite well in the end anyway. And so in order to prepare yourself before you go low carb, make sure that you have everything at home that you need. So blood sugar equipment, blood sugar meter, test strips, which I know can be a challenge sometimes, but make sure you have plenty of those at home, because you may need to check your blood sugar more often than usual when you go low carb. That's better, thank you. And make sure you have the glucotabs or whatever you want to treat your blood sugar, low blood sugars with, in case that happens, because it may. But of course, I always advocate for glucotabs, because they're the most exact method of bringing your blood sugar up to healthy levels again if it dips down. You also, I really highly recommend that you have at least seen the cover of the book. I should have had it here, of the book from Dr. Richard Bernstein, Diabetes Solution. Start reading it and you will get everything going as you should. But that is sort of the low carb Bible of the type 1 world. So I really recommend you to get that book, read that book, inhale that book, and also check out his YouTube series, Diabetes University, of course, because there's so many gems in there. And yes, so blood sugar equipment, glucotabs, Dr. Bernstein's book, and what do you do with the insulin then? Well, it really depends. You have to, this requires that you are insanely, well, no, but you have to be comfortable with your own management. You have to be comfortable of changing your insulin dosages on your own and not have to speak to a healthcare provider all the time, because changes when you change to low carb may be rapid. So as long as you know that and you are comfortable with it, let's go. So as I always say it, you have basically 2 to 2.5 ways of changing from high carb to low carb. And especially as a type 1, I can recommend one or the other, but I'll do that afterwards. I'll present them to you first, and then I'll recommend which one I think is the smartest way to do it. And so the first way of going low carb is, of course, to quit all carbs or all unnecessary carbs cold turkey. So from one day to another, you stop eating pasta, rice, bread, sugar, bulgur, quinoa, all of these things that you thought were healthy before, sweet potatoes, starchy veg, all of it in one go. And that is one way, and that works for very many people, of course. It can be a little bit more challenging, I find, than the alternative, but it is a very good and effective way to get rid of everything at once, and then you're done with it. It's a bit like ripping off a Band-Aid. You always have 2 choices, you know? And it is, of course, then you have to remember, as you have lowered the carbs, you have to remember to increase your proteins and your fats so that you still get enough energy, but not maybe from the stuff that is, you know, harming your health and causing roller coaster blood sugars, like I explained in the last episode, and also cause you high blood sugars that are very damaging to your system and your body. So yes, number 1, go cold turkey if you feel like being crazy, and that will be fine. But you can also, and this is, of course, it's already shown through, I can't hide it, but my preferred method of doing it, because you can do it step by step. You can adjust medications as necessary and all of that stuff. So it makes it easier if you are type 1 to do it step by step instead of cold turkey. I know there's many type 1s out there who are very, very happy with doing it cold turkey style, and kudos to you. It's fantastic. And if you can manage to change your medication accordingly, that's fantastic. But it's a lot easier to actually do it step by step. So there you also have 2 choices. Step by step version 1 means that you change your 3 to 6 meals that you have been eating from before on your earlier way of eating. You change 1 meal at a time into a low carb one. So for example, this week or in the next 10 days, you will make all your breakfasts low carb, and that's fine. And then the next week or the next 10 days, you will make all your breakfasts and lunches low carb, and that's fine. And then you do it, you know, dinner, and then maybe it's easier to start with the snacks if you're having snacks, but you know, in the end, you have those 3 to 6 meals. They are all low carb, and you will see it straight away on your blood sugar curves. And that's going to be very, very rewarding. I think it was for me, and I know it is for many, many others. So let's see if you have the same success. The other, of course, way, which is how I did it when I started, because I didn't have anyone to tell me anything. I was completely out of my own. I did my own research. I did my own everything, and I had very little clue of actually what's going on. I didn't have much support. So the way I did it was that I did it group by group. So I got the notion of low carb and how that would be beneficial to me as a type 1. I realized it. I wanted to take action on it, but the question was how. So I started with cutting out everything with gluten, for example. First, that was my first step, because autoimmunity, as type 1 diabetes is, it is an autoimmune disease, and gluten don't go very well together. And so that's why I started cutting out everything with gluten first. And then after a while, I'm like, seeing the results of my blood sugar meter, I'm like, what else can I do to make it better, even better? So I started cutting out all the other grains, like rice and oats, the gluten-free oats, and all of these things that are still, supposed to be in a so-called healthy diet, but it wasn't healthy for me because it completely roller coastered my blood sugar. And so I started taking away those. And then, of course, first of all, in this whole process, I forgot to say, because it was so self-evident to me, but I removed all the sugars, all sugars that were all added sugars, all sweets, all everything like that, and then gluten, and then grains. And then step by step, also the sort of the healthy grains like quinoa and bulgur and all of this stuff that we were told was super healthy. Legumes also had to go because they clearly didn't work with my blood sugar. And then also things like starchy root vegetables, for example, don't quite agree with me as well as I would like them to. And so yeah, that was sort of more of a step-by-step version of that in that way. And I'm very happy I did that way, because I had time to realize, oh, okay, now there's another step coming. I have to adjust my blood sugar, I have to adjust my insulin, I have to adjust my medications. And then I knew from step to step, which I maybe not have realized in a cold turkey situation, and I may have gotten myself into some really sticky low blood sugars, which I did anyway, unfortunately, but I managed to save them all, luckily, and I'm still here, so it worked out. But I'm very, very adamant about telling people that there are choices on how to go low carb, and it's awesome, but you have to find the way that works for you. And I think the easiest way is to do it step by step, either by meal or by group of food things. And yeah, throughout this process, remember to up your protein, up your fat, so that you still have enough energy and you don't go starving yourself, because that is so not the point of this. It's just to become healthier and happier and have normal, stable, wonderful CGM lines and blood sugars. CGM, for those of you who don't know, is a continuous glucose monitor that measures your blood sugar every 5 minutes. I have one sitting there. And yeah, they're very, very helpful, especially when you're doing a lifestyle change, especially on your own and without any support from others, maybe. There are, of course, very supportive groups on the interwebs. And if you have read the book I mentioned before, Dr. Bernstein's Diabetes Solution, there's a fantastic group for you on Facebook called Type 1 Grit that you absolutely have to join, because they give you so much support and help and power and uplifting comments when things go wrong, and you can celebrate with them and you can cry with them, and it's just a fantastic place to get support if this is something that you want to do for yourself and your health and your diabetes. Because let me tell you, going low carb and in the way I did, we can discuss how I did it, but going low carb is definitely the one thing that I've done for my health and my diabetes and myself that has helped me the very, very most. Subsequently, there's been a lot of other lifestyle changes, which we will come to in a later episode, but that was the first and the biggest step that I've taken. So I really recommend it to increase your health, of course. A few tips. When you go low carb as a type 1, keep track of everything for the first sort of week or 2 or 3, even depending on how long you feel that it's necessary. Things like, first of all, keep track of your food. I know it's super boring and I don't like it myself either, but it is really important to see that you're eating first enough and the right things and at the right times. You can see that much better if you track it for a couple of days or a week or something. And that is something that I really recommend. I don't like it myself, I know, but at every lifestyle change, I do it just to get a better overview for myself. And I can get, because otherwise you get quite lost in details and it becomes quite difficult. So that is the food. Also track your blood sugar. Please, for the love of everything holy, please track your blood sugars before going low carb, during going low carb, after going low carb, because you can see the patterns, the blood sugar patterns so much better. And you can see where you possibly need to change your insulin dose, maybe lower it both. And remember that you may have to lower both basal and bolus insulins for your new low carb lifestyle. So don't forget, don't get yourself into trouble. Make sure you have all those things that I mentioned in the beginning at home so that you are prepared for any eventualities that may or may not happen. Everything might go fine, and that's great, but it's always good to be prepared. Yes, so what I've gone over for you today is how you start a low carb lifestyle with type 1 diabetes. Be prepared, you have different ways of doing it, and track everything for a little while so that you get a good look into what's happening with your health, your blood sugars, your insulin dosages, and your food. Until next week, have a good one.